The president of the International Union of Police Associations has called for the Broward County deputies to no longer offer a security detail for the Miami Dolphins so long as they refuse to stand for the national anthem. Now, only a few players of the Miami Dolphins are not standing for the national anthem. The president says, Jeffery Bell, quote, "We've asked the deputies and the Broward Sheriff's Office not to do the details anymore." He goes on to say, "I respect their right to have freedom of speech. However, in certain organizations and certain jobs, you give up that right of your freedom of speech temporarily while you serve that job or while you play in an NFL game." So these players, the running back, for example, Aaron Foster, has said that the time to protest is never convenient. He says, quote, "They say it's not time to do this. Then when is it time? It's never the time in someone else's eye." Jeffery Bell, although is very contentious in his plea, and I think it's important that we note that this is a plea, this isn't an order. He says, "I can only imagine the public outcry if a group of police officers refused to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance or if we turned our back for the American flag for the national anthem. There would be a public outcry and internal affairs complaints a mile long on that." Now, worth noting, the Miami-Dade police, who also offer a security detail for the Miami Dolphins, have gone on the record. They say that they have a contractual obligation with the Hard Rock Stadium to provide public safety. The safety of our residents and visitors is our primary concern, so they will continue to offer their security, and they have done so. And again, like I said in the introduction, it's worth noting that this is just a guy named Jeffery Bell, who is the president of this important organization in Miami, who is asking for the Broward County deputies to step away from offering security for these games. This isn't an order.
Yeah, how can you sit there and ask someone to deny the service that they have to do to protect and serve the citizens of your community, especially when you're forced by a contract, when you're contractually obligated to do so, aside from honoring your profession, when these people are just exercising their First Amendment rights? How can you do that? How can you ask that? This person, I mean, look, I want to say this person deserves to be fired because I'm heated in the moment. I feel like we always escalated to that situation. But this person needs a stern fucking talking to.
All right, well, Jason, what would you say when he says, "I respect the right to have freedom of speech. However, when that job or while you play in an NFL game, you have to sort of temporarily suspend that."
That's not true either.
What do you think about that? That's what he says.
So that's what, there's a lot that was said here that really blows my mind about, especially, okay, let me answer your question. I don't agree with that at all. I think, first of all, when you play in an NFL game, viewers are going to hate me, but it's just a football game. And I mean, I'm not an avid sports fan, so maybe I don't have the right to say that, but I think if these players want to exercise their right as Americans during one of America's favorite pastimes, they should be able to do that and do that respectfully. They're not hurting anyone. They're not being vulgar, inappropriate, or having a boo pop out at like Janet's did in the Super Bowl. They're just wanting to bring awareness to something that's important to them. Why should they not be able to do that? So I don't agree with him at all. And also, I do agree with the fact that when is the right time to protest? Is it when we're watching Grey's Anatomy at 9 o'clock on Thursdays? Is that a perfect time to protest? There is no right time.
There's never a convenient time.
It's also civil disobedience in this instance. They're making a statement, and what really upsets me about this whole story, not specifically this part, but since it started, is the fact that we're talking about the conversation that's happening and not necessarily the meat of it. Like what is being said is not being talked about at all. We're not talking about Black Lives Matter. We're not talking about disproportionate use of force within the police community, disproportionately targeting black communities rather than white ones, or any other community. Like, we're not talking about any of that. We're just talking about someone's right to protest or not, which really, we're missing the point, which really upsets me. But one thing I did want to say is that this person seems really bitter about the fact that these NFL players get to protest in such a public way when the police wouldn't necessarily be able to do that. Now, there is one thing that he's right about. There are certain jobs when you're in public service where you're not allowed to go on strike. And police is one of them. And firemen are also one of them because they have a very important task. It's ensuring the public safety, right? So they're not allowed to, but they do. In police unions and fire departments, they won't go on strike, but they'll halt, slow down their workflow, or they'll ramp up their workflow in an effort to protest. So even police unions exercise whenever they're disgruntled or whenever they're upset about something, they get to exercise their rights. Why can't NFL players do that, especially when there's nothing that holds them back from doing this?
Yeah, Hassan, you hit on a good point, and I just want to echo two of those things you said. For example, being an NFL player is not a public servant.
Right.
You are not a public servant if you are playing football. That's one. I think it's important to remember. The second thing is that this is the land of the free, and therefore you have the freedom to dissent. If you disagree with the government, that's, again, our First Amendment right. This story the story of NFL players kneeling or sitting or abstaining from standing for the national anthem has absolutely taken on a life of its own. And it's frustrating, I think, for all of us that we're not talking about the real issue, which is why they are protesting. The protest is not the problem. It's the why behind it.
Right.
Jason, what do you think about that?
I think I agree with you 100%. You know, that they're doing it to bring awareness to something that needs to have awareness brought to it.
But do you think we're focusing too much on the protest?
Absolutely, because people are really sensitive about sports. You know, and God forbid you do something that someone doesn't like while the Cowboys are playing. You know, it's just so, it blows my mind. But I do think that the people that are upset about why these players are kneeling need to do their homework and be like, wow, they're bringing awareness to Black Lives Matter. To, you know, my friend who is a huge football fan was like, black men and African Americans are under attack in the United States. And that was such a powerful statement for me, because I don't feel that way for myself. But if someone else feels that way, and these players obviously do, then awesome. Do what you need to do to bring awareness. And football players, athletes are stars. So people are going to definitely make light of that and definitely take and recognize that too as well. There's something else I wanted to say that was, that these players, even though they're kneeling and not standing for the national anthem, they're still playing in the football game. Mm-hmm. And that's why we're watching the game. So it's not like they're doing anything that's detrimental to the game. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, that's why you're watching this game, and that's why you're enjoying the sport.
No one's watching the NFL for the national anthem.
One of the things I hate the most, though, is when people are just like, these are rich millionaire people like that get to protest. Like, what are you protesting? Like, these people died for the flag that you're protesting. It's like, no, those people died to protect the rights to exactly what they're doing. Like, we're not living under tyranny. Why? I just simply, I can't grasp the concept of how you can be upset when someone does this. Even if it was for a terrible cause, even if it was for something that I deem inappropriate, like, let's say if it was a couple white players saying like, oh, we support the KKK, they're still allowed to do it. I'm still allowed to criticize it, but they're still allowed to do it, as long as it doesn't incite hatred.
Young Turks membership is awesome.
Says who?
Says me.
You got the right one, honey, because I'm a crazy bitch.
Okay, well, that's true as well. So become a member at tytnetwork.com/join.